Simple and plain. To be the best, you have to win. That's why I play the game.
Hey guys, welcome back to Lakers Exclusive, where we talk exclusively about Lakers basketball. Now, as we all know, the NBA Finals have officially kicked off with the Phoenix Suns taking out Game 1 in an absolutely outstanding performance by CP3 and Devin Booker. I thought they really took over the game, and it's just got me thinking as a Lakers fan, how much of a dynamic duo CP3 and Kobe could have been back in the day. How many championships could they have won for the Lakers? But I guess as Lakers fans, it's just something that we have to live with, There's nothing we can do about it. But I just would have loved to have seen that duo in a Lakers uniform. But it's also got me thinking about our point guard situation moving forward into the next offseason. What players that we could possibly bring into the team to help us win another championship, or moves that we don't necessarily have to make moving forward, to put us in a good position to obviously win the championship, which is obviously the overall goal for every season. So what I thought we might do on this channel is to come up with a little series where we go through the Lakers options, position by position, and really assess what players are out there, whether it be players that we can bring in or players that we already have to put us in the best spot and to put alongside LeBron James and Anthony Davis moving forward. So let's start with the point guard position. One of the most important positions in the NBA. Everyone knows that. And in a perfect world, I think everybody can agree in Laker Nation that we want to see a little bit of Dame time in purple and gold. Now, I think if you put a player like Damian Lillard alongside LeBron James, one of the greatest players of all time, and one of the most dominant bigs and a defensive beast in Anthony Davis, you're going to see, probably the best trio in NBA history right there. You bring in a player like Dame, who we know has that clutch gene and can just absolutely kill teams on a nightly basis. And you pair him alongside a player in LeBron James, who's arguably the greatest player of all time. It's absolute chaos. And I think, that's multiple championships moving forward. In saying that, for this to happen, you're going to have to see Damian Lillard go to the Trailblazers and say, look, guys, I've been here for so long. I've been loyal. I've been balling for the last 10 or so years. I just don't think it's going to work out with the roster that we have, with the performances that we've been putting together over the last couple of years. I just don't think we can get it done here in Portland. Can you please, if you don't mind, trade me to the Los Angeles Lakers? Because I think that's a team that's going to put me in the best position to win my first championship. That's what's going to have to happen in reality. And then we're going to have to give up all our assets. That means Kuzma's gone, KCP, Dennis Schroeder. And then we have to think about whether Dennis Schroeder is actually going to, accept that. Does he want to go to Portland? Harrell, THT, they've all going to go. Is Harrell going to opt in? So all these things have to come together for us to get Damian Lillard. And, it's highly unlikely that this is going to happen, or whether Damian Lillard's even going to go to Portland and say that. But, of course, this is the perfect world we're talking about. So it's highly unlikely that it's going to happen, but, fingers crossed. If we get Damian Lillard, we're sitting pretty, definitely. Another player I want to talk about, and a player that I talked about at the start of the video, is CP3. Obviously we can see how good CP3 still is. He's obviously balling with the Suns right now, but again, in a perfect world, if we land CP3, one of the most complete point guards that you'll ever see, again, I think that's multiple championships moving forward for the Lakers. But realistically, I think he's really found a home over there in Phoenix, and you've seen them, gel as a team and obviously put it together and, go on this championship run. And I really think they're probably going to get it done this year as well. So I think you'll see Chris Paul opt out of his contract and then re-sign on a multi-year deal and, finish out his career in Phoenix, and good luck to him. So realistically, the chances of getting Dame and CP3 is, very unrealistic, but again, fingers crossed. We've seen crazier things happen in the NBA. Another player that I want to talk about, though, is Kyle Lowry, who's sort of similar to CP3 in a way. They're both defensive pit bulls on the defensive end. I think Kyle Lowry is probably a better defender than CP3. He has this ability to draw charges. He's always up in the top of the league for drawing charges, and he does it at pinnacle moments in games as well, which is something the Lakers should use, although I think CP3 is probably a better playmaker and floor general than Kyle Lowry. But the Lakers know that Kyle Lowry can still play. They pursued him at the trade deadline this season We didn't pull the trigger, and I guess the sticking point was, do we trade THT? Do we not trade him? We ended up keeping him, which I think in hindsight is probably a good move, because I think THT's sort of ceiling is an all-star in this league, and we'll get to THT later on in this video. But the point is, the Lakers see something in Kyle Lowry, and I think he has the attributes to fit alongside, our two all-stars in James and AD. He can shoot the ball. As I said, he's a great defender, and he's just an all-round, complete point guard. He has the attributes in all categories to be a good point guard, and he's proved that in the league. He's also, got championship experience. Obviously, he went on the run with Kawhi Leonard there in the Raptors, and it was a big part of that as well. He's really a core piece to that Raptors team, and he's been there for so many years and really been a vital part of their movement over there. In terms of, what we'd have to give up, it'd probably have to be a sign and trade. We'd have to give up those young assets. Obviously, we probably won't part ways with THT, but again, we don't know sort of what, the value on the market is for Kyle Lowry at the moment, so the Lakers will probably have to assess that before we can make any moves. But in terms of the fit, it works, and the Lakers know it works. That's why we pursued him. Can we get the job done? That's another thing. Other teams are on the market looking for a point guard, and he's obviously one of the best options. And look, in terms of the best overall fit, I think these three players are definitely at the top of the list. And signing any one of them, you just definitely can't go wrong. They're all great players in their own rights. But let's look at some more realistic options now. And first of all, I want to look within our organization and see what are our, options that we already have at the point guard position. And look, let's look no further than LeBron James. I mean, if we go back only one season ago where we won the championship, who was our point guard? It's LeBron James. Who's one of the best playmakers in the league, if not the best playmaker? LeBron James. And I think really we play our best basketball when the ball's in LeBron James's hands. And I still believe, moving forward, no matter who we get at the point guard position, LeBron James is going to have the ball in his hands in those crunch moments. So why not run it back with LeBron James at point guard and maybe, look at signing an all-star at the shooting guard or small forward position. And then you could possibly go down the avenue of acquiring, a quality backup point guard who could come off the bench and just light it up. A player like Lou Will comes to mind, because that's something that we really lacked this season. Just a player that can come off the bench, still provide that playmaking, but score the ball. We really lacked offense off the bench, and I think a player like Lou Will, for instance, can really help us out. So when LeBron James has his rest, we still get that scoring and that playmaking. So that's honestly the avenue that I'd take. But in saying that, there's also an argument that LeBron James isn't getting any younger, and should he really have the ball coming up the floor every time for the Lakers? When's he going to rest and stuff? And obviously we've seen LeBron, sort of take it back a notch on the defensive end over the past couple of years. He obviously just doesn't have the same motor as it used to be. And that's fine, because that's where he can sort of get away with it in the whole context of the game. So realistically, in the foreseeable future, should the Lakers invest in a young point guard who can defend, score, and play make at a higher level? Well, they answered that this season by acquiring Dennis Schroeder at the start of the season for a pick in Danny Green. And at the start, we were all hyped because, he has the attributes that the Lakers need. And when the trade came through, I was like, shit, we're about to win this thing again, because on paper, our team just looks so much better than it did the year before when we won the championship. Did it work out that way during this season? No. Were the Lakers unhealthy for the majority of the season? Yes. Did Dennis Schroeder play his best? No. Does it look like a good fit? Probably not. Does that mean that it can't work in the future? Well, we can debate about that. And with his asking price of $100 and $120 million, the Lakers are going to have to pay for Dennis Schroeder, because I'm sure there's another team out there that needs a young point guard that has the attributes as we spoke about for Dennis Schroeder, and they're going to be wanting to acquire him as well. So the question is, do we risk losing something that we may need in the future and can be meaningful moving forward? Because, LeBron's only got 2 or 3 years left in his prime, we believe, so we need someone that's going to be there for Anthony Davis moving forward as well. But let's not forget, we also have some other young players that the Lakers very well might ask to step up in this point guard role this season. And I want to talk about THT first and foremost. A player that's been well talked about as the best young asset that the Lakers have. And as we all know, is the sticking point, as I talked about before, in the Kyle Lowry trade just before the trade deadline this season. And when we have these young assets, I really like to keep a close eye on them during the season and stuff. And for me, Taylor Horton-Tucker has all the attributes to be an all-star in this league. You know, for a young player who's got an amazing wingspan, can drive to the basket really well, and has an effective jump shot. And we saw that throughout last season. You know, he'd go on these, 10-point runs by himself, and he just looked, everything that the Lakers think he is. Although, obviously, with such a young player, there's always room for improvement. I think he shot about 28% from the three-point line this season, and by all rights, he's been in the gym at the start of this season, really getting in there early and working on that shot. I think he's working with lethal shooter, and, that's something that you really want to see from a young player. But what really intrigues me the most about THT is he's shown the ability to play make as well, and in such a young player, that's something that's very valuable. And you'd see sometimes last year when the Lakers would be in some scoring rut, they just couldn't score the ball for some reason, and Schroeder would come off, they'd bring THT on, and he'd just play make and come up with plays, and the Lakers just look so much better with THT out there. So they could very much lean on THT, and I believe he can really do the job. The question is, can they afford, THT's rookie mistakes and all this stuff when they only have a championship window of 2 or 3 years? Do they need someone that's more experienced at that position? But, THT is definitely a valuable asset moving forward no matter where he is. Is it the point guard position? We'll have to wait and see. Another young player that we already have is Alex Caruso, who's played the point guard position, many times for the Lakers in the past. And, we brought him in one game in the finals last year, and he's just a defensive beast. He's our best defender. He can play make a little bit and shot the ball really well from 3 last year. And I love everything about Alex Caruso. He just maybe doesn't have the attributes as a point guard. He's more of sort of a combo guard, shooting guard who can drive to the rack, dunk the ball, play extraordinary defense. I just don't think moving forward he's our best point guard option. But again, I'm hoping that we can re-sign Alex Caruso no matter what. But, if we need to lean on Alex Caruso, I believe he can do the job as well. You've seen it in the finals, and just defensively, he just makes our team so much better. But again, it's really up to the front office what they want to do here. Do they take a cheaper option? Do they try and get an all-star point guard? Or do they go for one of these mid-range players that we can possibly bring in? And that's what I want to talk about. Sort of those tier 2 players right now that I think would be a great fit for the Lakers moving forward. And these are probably the players that are the most realistic players that we'll probably bring in if we didn't sign Dennis Schroeder or if we sign and trade Dennis Schroeder. And I want to start with a very familiar face that we all know here in Lakerland, and that's Lonzo Ball. I mean, when he played for the Lakers, he was very up and down, let's admit it. But you have to think, coming in with all that pressure, Magic saying he's going to have his jersey in the rafters, he's going to win multiple championships, his dad out in the media saying all this crazy stuff, that's a lot of pressure for a player in his first couple years in the league. And I think we really saw, the effects of that in Lonzo Ball. He just didn't seem as confident in the NBA as he did in college. And I think some of us really forget that he was injured throughout pretty much his whole time there in the Lakers. He had multiple leg injuries. He always just seemed to be injured. But when he was on the floor, we won a lot of games. We won more games than we lost. And, his combination with LeBron James was actually pretty good in my opinion. And, obviously he got traded to the Lakers in that Anthony Davis trade. And anytime you can get a player like Anthony Davis, you do that trade 10 times out of 10. Because it's going to give you a championship, and look what happened, we won the championship. But since he's moved to the Pelicans, he seemed to be a lot more healthy, and he's really improved as a player, in my opinion, in multiple categories. He's become a much better defender, and in my opinion, is one of the best defensive guards in the NBA at the moment. He's also very much improved as a three-point shooter. His shot just looks so much better, and there was so many times this year where he'd shoot like 8 threes a game and just look unstoppable from the three-point line. Was he that type of shooter in LA? No, he wasn't. So you can see that he's really worked on his game. He's really in the gym, and he's just a much better player now. And all these attributes really fit alongside what LeBron James and AD need. He can bring the ball up. He's got outstanding court vision, and he's just an improved shooter. He's, a complete point guard in my opinion. It's just whether we can get that deal done. I think he's a restricted free agent. So we'd probably have to, give him a significant offer that the Pelicans can't match. But I think, that fit with Lonzo Ball coming back, he's familiar with LeBron James and how he plays, and I think he'll just slot right in. Another player that we need to talk about is Spencer Dinwiddie, and the rumors have already started with Spencer Dinwiddie coming to the Lakers. He's reported that he wants a significant offer, or he wants to come home to LA. And there's been a lot of old tweets popping up saying that he wants to come to the Lakers and all this stuff, and he's really fond of Kobe Bryant. In terms of the overall fit, though, comparing him to Schroeder, I think he's, a little bit of a better player than Schroeder. You know, he's an underrated passer, he's an underrated defender, and he can really score the ball, which is something that the Lakers really need. I think to go out in the market and get a point guard, we need someone who can really light it up, and Spencer Dinwiddie can do that. I wouldn't say he's a great three-point shooter, and that's something that the Lakers really need. You know, we really need these shooters, because all these other teams in the league have shooters, and that's something that we really lack. But what he is really effective at is, you know, pulling up from mid-range and sinking buckets and driving to the rack, and he's just an all-around a great scorer, and that's something that Spencer Dinwiddie's going to give you. On the other side, he is coming off a significant injury. You know, he really didn't play at all last year, and that's something that the Lakers are going to have to assess, and the rest of the league's going to have to assess as well. But in terms of the overall fit, again, just like Lonzo, I think it does work. You know, we need a guy that can play make, that we can throw the ball to, and he can just score and give us, you know, another option down the stretch. Another player that I want to talk about and who really intrigues me is Terry Rozier from the Hornets. And it's for the simple fact that out of all these sort of second-tier players, Terry's probably the one that can play off the ball the best. And with a player like LeBron James, who's going to, you know, have the ball in his hands, Terry can still space the floor and shoot the ball at a high clip. And this season, we really saw Terry shoot the ball amazing, especially from the corners. I think he shot about 40% from the corners or something crazy like that. And if we have a player like Terry there who can, you know, carry the offensive load when LeBron and AD's not on the floor, a player that we can just throw the ball to and trust that he can make something happen, who's also an underrated playmaker and who's very much present on the defensive end. You know, a player like Terry Rozier is right up there for me in contention for one of the best options for the Lakers this season. And out of these second-tier players, that's probably the player that I'd want to see on the Lakers the most, just because he can provide that shooting off the ball, as well as, you know, score the ball off the dribble as well. We could also look at players like Mike Conley over there at the Jazz. Obviously, the Jazz had a really good year, and he was a big piece of that. Obviously, he was injured in the playoffs, and the Jazz really couldn't get it done over the Clippers there. But he's another combo guard who's a really good defender and can shoot the three ball well. In terms of the fit for the Lakers, you know, it really could work, but I think, you know, the Jazz really like him over there, and I think he's really found a home where he can finish his career over there. So the likelihood of, you know, the Lakers getting Mike Conley is probably very unlikely as well. We could also look at a player like Dragic over there at the Miami Heat, who can really, you know, he's just an all-round playmaker and scorer as well. You know, he's an aging player, and he's been a very valuable part at Miami for a number of years now, and I think you'll see the Miami Heat, you know, re-sign him, and he'll finish his career at the Miami Heat as well. So I think, you know, with these two aging players, they're probably not the best options. But if the Lakers were to sign, you know, Mike Conley or Goran Dragic, you know, you couldn't blame them, because, you know, in terms of the fit, they can really do something over here at the Lakers if we went that sort of route. But overall, these are the second-tier options which I expect the Lakers, you know, to go and look after if we can't get those big three names that we talked about in the first place. But let's just say that the Lakers can't get any of these options, or they don't want any of these options. What could we do at the point guard position to help us out? You know, we can go for a less expensive sort of option. You know, do we get a Derrick Rose? Do we go for a Patty Mills? Do we try and get Reggie Jackson? You know, these options and these cats that can go out and score the ball, play make a little bit, but maybe don't cost as much. And then we can, you know, try and get those better players at a shooting guard position or any other position. You know, do we go for the less expensive to give us more options at other positions? You know, that's something that Lakers have to think about. And I think this offseason in particular is going to be very important for our team moving forward, because it's going to set us up for the next couple years and the last few years of LeBron James's, you know, prime of his career. So it's going to be very interesting, and I'm really excited and really intrigued to see what, you know, path the Lakers take in this offseason. What players do we bring in? What players do we keep? What players do we let go of? But let me know in the comments what you guys think. What should the Lakers do at the point guard position moving forward? And be sure to subscribe to the channel if you are liking the content, and give us a big thumbs up. But for now, that's going to do it for this video. It's been your boy Jay from Lakers Exclusive. We'll catch you guys in the next one.